He never spoke. Not a word. Not when the ball hit him. Not when the others laughed. Not even when the coach knelt beside him and said, "Hey, you okay?" The boy just stared, eyes wide, lips sealed, like sound was a sin. The coach didn't push. He just sat, sweaty towel in hand, silent too. A stillness passed between them, one heavy with bruises that didn't show on the skin. The other kids ran back to drills. The boy stayed, still, silent, still broken. The coach didn't ask again. Instead, he tossed the ball toward him. Slow, soft, easy to catch. It bounced once and rolled to the boy's shoes. He looked down at it like it was fire. "Catch it," the coach said, voice low, careful not to scare the silence away. The boy didn't. But he didn't run either. For the first time, he didn't run. That was enough. Coach stood and walked back. Left the ball. Left the boy. Left the silence. But something stayed behind in the dust. A question. A pull. A whisper that maybe, just maybe, someone saw him. His name was Ayan, but no one at school used it. They just called him Mute or Ghost when they passed him in the hallway. Teachers said he was quiet by nature. But it wasn't nature, it was damage. Years of yelling at home had taught him silence meant survival. That day on the court, something cracked in the quiet. Not loud. Just a hairline fracture. Coach Terrence didn't ask questions, didn't hand him a ball, didn't force him to play. He just showed up every week. Consistent, not calm, a shadow that chose to stay. Ayan started staying longer after practice. Not speaking, just watching. He never played, but he always watched. Coach noticed. And one day, he started humming a tune while cleaning up cones. A soft melody. A simple loop. Ayan looked up, just once. Something stirred behind his eyes. The hum stayed with him. That night, Ayan tapped it on his desk. Over and over. Like the start of something. Like a note waiting for breath. Coach Terrence hummed often. Always the same tune. A slow, steady rise and fall like breath itself. He hummed while tying nets, fixing cones, taping ankles. Ayan never said a word, but the tune embedded itself. One day, Terrence hummed louder, deliberate. Ayan flinched. The coach paused, then kept humming, slower this time. The boy didn't leave. A week later, Ayan sat beside the court, drawing in a notebook. Not shapes. Not words. Just little lines. Notes, maybe? No one knew. But Coach saw. He nodded. That day, Terrence left behind a cheap plastic recorder. Old, scratched, silent. He didn't hand it to Ayan. Just set it down on the bench beside him and walked away. Ayan stared at it. Like it might bite. Then he reached out. Touched it. Not lifted. Just touched. That was enough. The tune kept humming in his mind long after the court emptied and the lights died. That night, Ayan took the recorder home. He didn't know why. He hid it beneath his mattress, wrapped in his hoodie. He didn't play it. Not yet. But his fingers found it in the dark, tracing its shape like braille. He started humming. Low. Wow. Soft. The same tune. One note at a time. It felt like breathing for the first time. Like speaking without fear. At school, he was still silent. But when no one was near, he mouthed the notes. No sound. Just the shape of melody on lips unused to song. Terrence never asked if he used it. But every week, he left a new recorder, better than the last. Ayan never said thanks. But the tune got clearer. One night, while the city slept and the world was still, he blew his first note. It cracked. Ugly. Awkward. But it was his. And in that fragile off-key sound, something opened. Ayan started showing up before practice. Just sat near the court while coach set up. Sometimes he'd hum. Sometimes he'd just watch. The other kids ignored him, mostly. One day, a ball rolled his way again. This time, he stopped it with his foot. Gently. Then kicked it back. Terence looked over and smiled. No words. Just that look. And Ayan felt it, that small warmth behind the ribs. Music became routine. He learned notes from memory. Played quietly behind the bleachers. And though his playing was broken, coach always paused. As if listening. Ayan started writing melodies in his notebook. No one saw. No one asked. But coach kept leaving better recorders. One had keys. One was wooden. One had a name carved in, TT. Ayan traced it with his finger. He didn't smile. But his breathing was different now. Deeper. Stronger. Like someone preparing to speak. The first time Ayan played in front of someone else, it was a mistake. He thought the gym was empty. It wasn't. Terence had forgotten his whistle. He walked in slow, quiet, and stopped mid-step when he heard it. Thin, off-key, but alive. Ayan sat alone, recorder to lips, eyes shut, letting the tune spill like secrets he never meant to share. Terence didn't speak, just listened. When the sound died, Ayan opened his eyes and saw him. He froze. Hands clenched around the recorder like it might vanish. Terence smiled gently and said, "Again." That was all. Just one word. But it cracked something deep. Ayan played again. Still shaky. Still soft. But this time, on purpose. Afterward, the coach said nothing. Just patted his shoulder once and walked out. That pat stayed on Ayan's skin for hours. A mark that said, "You were heard. You were seen." Coach started leaving music sheets on the bench. Simple stuff. Children's songs. Nursery tunes. Ayan studied them like puzzles. He didn't know how to read music, but his ears knew enough. He'd hum it first, then try to play. His fingers stumbled. Notes cracked. But he kept at it. Every day after school he ran to the gym. Recorder in his pocket, notebook under arm. He played when no one was there. Or when he thought no one was. Sometimes Terence would sweep the far corner, pretending not to listen. Ayan never spoke. But he began nodding in thanks. Just once. Subtle. Coach nodded back. One day, the sheet music was blank. Just a staff with no notes. Ayan stared at it like a dare. He tapped his pencil and started to write. Not from knowledge, from memory, from instinct. The melody he chose was broken. But it was his. One afternoon, the recorder broke. Cracked down the middle. Ayan held the pieces in shaking hands, panic flooding his chest. He didn't cry, but his breathing grew short, uneven. Terence saw. Didn't wait. Said nothing at first. Just knelt beside him. Then reached into his duffel and pulled out a black velvet pouch. Inside, a wooden flute. Hand-carved. Polished. Old. The coach placed it in Ayan's hands like it was sacred. "This one's real," he said. "And it's yours." Ayan blinked hard, trying not to show how his fingers trembled. He didn't say, "Thank you." He couldn't. But he held the flute close. That night, Ayan didn't just play. He closed his eyes and breathed music. For the first time, the melody didn't sound broken. It sounded like longing. Like truth. Like everything he never dared say out loud, finally had shape. The gym became a temple. Not just for sports now, but for sound. Ayan started staying late. Practicing until the lights flickered off. His fingers grew sure, his breath longer. Terence sometimes played drums on the bleachers with his hands, keeping rhythm. They never talked much. Just gestures. Glances. Music filled the space between them. One evening, A teacher wandered in and froze. She listened, eyes wide. "Who's playing?" she whispered. Terence nodded toward Ayan, who didn't even see her. He was lost, in tempo, in tune, in silence that had finally bloomed into something loud. After she left, Terence simply said, "You should let them hear you." Ayan said nothing, but his eyes didn't look away this time. They met the coach's, and in them was fear, and a flicker of yes. They called it a talent show, but to Ayan it felt like Judgment Day. A cafeteria turned stage. Folding chairs. Squeaky mic stands. Too many eyes. Terence sat in the back row, hands clasped, eyes calm. Ayan stepped onto the stage with the flute tucked close. He didn't look up, just closed his eyes and played. The first note cracked. The second rang true. The third floated. And soon there was no cafeteria. No eyes. No fear. Just breath and wood and sound that swelled from pain and peace alike. When it ended, silence held the room. Then applause, loud, real, surprise. But Ayan didn't bow. He just looked to the back row. Found Terence. And the coach? He wasn't clapping. Just smiling, eyes wet. Because he knew Ayan hadn't performed. He had spoken. Finally. Fully. After the talent show, teachers began to notice Ayan. Suddenly he was gifted, brilliant, promising. But no one asked where it started. No one saw the dust-stained gym or the man with tired eyes who hummed lullabies to silence. Ayan was entered in competitions. He didn't object. He won. Again and again. But with each ribbon came something bitter. Expectations. Smiles that weren't real. Audiences that clapped at the wrong notes. He missed the quiet. Missed the way Terence never judged the pitch. Just the courage. At home, his parents started saying things like, "Finally, you're doing something useful." But the praise felt hollow, like a song with no soul. Ayan kept playing, kept winning. But at night, when the trophy sat on shelves and the claps faded, he still returned to the gym. Still played for one listener. And when Terence clapped, it meant something. Middle school came with bigger stages, real stages. Velvet curtains. Spotlights. Judges with clipboards. Ayan wore a borrowed shirt and shoes too tight. Before his performance, a woman backstage asked, "Who trained you?" He said nothing, just pointed at the crowd. She followed his finger and saw no one familiar. Just a coach in a hoodie at the back, hands in pockets, head bowed. She raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she said. Ayan clenched the flute tighter. Played anyway. Played fiercely. Not for the score. For him. The judges nodded. Parents cheered. But afterward the woman returned. "You could go far," she said, "if you get real instruction." Ayan didn't answer. Just packed his flute. But that night, in the mirror, his fingers trembled. What if they were right? What if Terence was just a phase? What if growing meant outgrowing? Coach didn't ask how the competition went. He never did. He just said, "You still playing for you?" Ayan hesitated, then nodded, but it wasn't true. Something had shifted. He started practicing less in the gym, more in his room. Alone, with recordings, with scales, with methods. He chased precision, perfection, and slowly the music started to sound clean, cold. He didn't notice at first, but Terence did. One evening, as Ayan played a flawless piece, Terence didn't clap. He just said, "You forgot the crack." Ayan blinked. "What?" "The part where it hurts a little. That's the part they remember." "How?" Ayan didn't respond. Just packed up. He didn't come back the next week. Or the next. The flute still sat on his desk. But the silence had returned. Not the same silence as before. This one sounded like distance. Weeks passed. The gym stayed quiet. Terence stopped leaving music sheets. Stopped waiting. Ayan noticed, but didn't go. He told himself he was too busy, too focused. But one night, he found himself walking there anyway. The lights were off. The door locked. Through the window, the bench where they used to sit was gone. Replaced with new equipment. Bright cones. Glossy balls. No flutes. No echoes. Just absence. Ayan pressed his forehead to the glass. The hum in his chest was gone. The music still played in his fingers. But his soul? That part had stopped singing. He stepped back from the window and looked down. A single sheet of music lay on the ground. Wind fluttered. Blank died. He picked it up, held it close. For the first time in months, he cried. The next day, Ayan found Terence in the parking lot, alone, loading balls into his trunk. He didn't say hello, just stood there silent. Terence looked up. "You came." Ayan nodded, then pulled the flute from his backpack. "I think I forgot how to play," he whispered. Terence stepped closer. "Then let's remember together." No lesson, no lecture. Just two figures on an empty court as the sun dipped low. Ayan played a note, then another. Each one cracked, not perfect, but full. Terence tapped rhythm on his thigh. They played nothing anyone else would recognize. But to them, it was a song. A hymn to broken beginnings. To finding voice. To choosing who you play for, even when the world tells you to play for them. And in that moment, Ayan remembered, the music wasn't in the flute. It was in the silence between two people who stayed. The flute broke again. This time, Ayan didn't panic. He simply picked up the pieces and wrapped them gently in a soft cloth. He walked to Terence's house, a place he'd never been, and knocked. Terence opened the door, surprised but not startled. Ayan held out the broken flute. "It's time," he said. Terence stepped back. Let him in. The house was quiet, lined with shelves of old records, faded photos, dusty trophies from years no one asked about. In the corner sat a cello, untouched. "You played?" Ayan asked. Terence nodded. "Used to. What happened?" The coach looked at his hands. "Life." Ayan held the flute tighter. "Teach me more." Terence smiled. Not proud. Not excited. Just ready. "We'll start with listening." And so they did. They didn't play a single note that night. Just sat between old speakers and listened to Mahler until it hurt. Terence didn't give Ayan a new flute. He gave him vinyl. Scores. Silence. Lessons in restraint. "Don't just play music," he said. "Feel where it breathes." Ayan listened to old recordings late into the night, tracing crescendos with his fingers. His notebook filled not with notes, but with questions. What does longing sound like? What does forgiveness look like when written in sound? He started composing, slowly, clumsily, lines that bled between grief and grace. Terence gave no approval, only truth. "This part sounds scared. This one's hiding something." Ayan didn't defend. He revised. They spent nights dissecting silence, peeling open measures like wounds. Ayan grew, not just as a musician but as a storyteller. And deep in his core, a truth began to form, that maybe the reason Terence stopped playing wasn't failure. Maybe it was heartbreak. One evening during a storm, the power went out mid-listen. The record player stopped. The lights died. But neither of them moved. Ayan sat still, fingers tapping the rest of the movement into silence. Then, without warning, Terence spoke. She was a violinist. Ayan turned. Terence's voice was low, like he hadn't spoken her name in years. "She died on the way to a performance. I was supposed to drive. I didn't." Ayan said nothing. Just listened. "After that," Terence continued, "I stopped hearing music. Until you." The room stayed dark. But something bright flickered between them. Not pity. Not even grief. Recognition. Ayan didn't try to fix it. Didn't ask questions. Just reached for the broken flute, held it between them, and whispered, "Then let's write something she would have wanted to hear." The next piece Ayan composed wasn't for school. It wasn't for judges. It was for her, the violinist in Terence's silence. He titled it, "Still Breathing," a quiet overture. Terence didn't ask to hear it, but Ayan left the sheet music on his doorstep. No note. No explanation. That night, Ayan sat in his room, heart pounding. Then, faintly, from across the street, a cello began to play. Raw. Fractured. Alive. What? A conversation across windows. A duet through pain. The next morning, Ayan found the sheet music returned, with a single mark in the margin, a circled rest. No words. Just a pause. That's all they needed. From then on, every piece Ayan wrote had one rest circled in red. Not because something was missing, but because that's where grief breathed. Months passed. Ayan played more, wrote more, smiled more. Not wide but true. His music changed too. Less polished. More human. He stopped trying to impress. Started trying to speak. One night after a school recital, a stranger approached Terence. "That boy," she said. "Who taught him?" Terence looked at Ayan, who stood laughing softly with classmates, his flute tucked under his arm. "Life did," he replied. She frowned. "No teacher?" Terence shook his head. "Not the kind you're thinking of." Ayan turned, met his gaze from across the room, and nodded. They didn't wave. Didn't speak. Just held the silence between them like a thread, the kind that never snaps, even if stretched by time. And in that moment, Terence knew he hadn't just taught Ayan to play. He'd taught him to hear. An invitation arrived in a thick envelope with gold trim, the National Youth Symphony's winter auditions. Ayan opened it with trembling fingers. This was everything he'd worked for. Everything teachers had promised, judges had whispered. He brought it to Terence. Laid it on the table. "They want me in New York." Terence didn't smile. "That's good," he said. But his voice didn't carry joy. "It's a good stage," he added. Ayan nodded. "You think I should go?" Silence. Then, "Only if you'll still recognize your music after." The words landed like bricks. "You're saying no?" Terence looked at him. "I'm saying be careful who you let tune your voice." Ayan stood. Angry. Confused. "You taught me to want this." Terence didn't flinch. "No, I taught you to speak, wanting to be heard. That was always yours." The silence between them cracked, not broken, but shaken. Ayan left without another word. Ayan didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on his desk like a dare. He stared at it until morning, then packed his flute and left. The audition hall was a cathedral of sound, marble floors, velvet curtains, rows of talent. He waited backstage, watching other prodigies tune, polish, preen. When his name was called, he walked to center stage and stood beneath the chandelier. The judges didn't look up, just waited. He lifted his flute, took a breath, and paused. In that pause, he heard it, the gym, the dust, the first note that cracked. He played. Not the technical piece they requested. He played the melody he wrote with Terence, "Still Breathing." No perfect scales. No grand flourishes. Just heart. When he finished, there was silence. Then one judge scribbled something. Another cleared their throat. "Next," they said. And Ayan walked off. Head high. Hands steady. Backstage he didn't cry. Didn't check the scores. Just walked out into the chill New York air and called Terence. No answer. No voicemail. Just the silence he once feared. He flew home that night. walked straight from the airport to Terrence's apartment. The lights were off. The mailbox was full. Something sank in Ayan's chest. He checked the gym. Empty. Empty. The cello, gone. That night, Ayan sat on the gym steps alone, flute in lap. The wind was sharp. Streetlights flickered. For the first time since he was 9, he felt small. Then he reached into his coat pocket and found the folded sheet Terrence once marked, the circled rest. He opened his notebook, wrote a new title, Silence in Memory. And below it, for the one who never asked to be heard. Weeks passed. No word. Then, a letter arrived. Handwritten, Dutch. No return address. Just 4 lines. I heard. You played what mattered. That's more than most ever do. Keep writing, I'll be listening. No name. But he knew. Ayan framed the note. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder that music wasn't about applause. It was about memory, about the echo left behind. He began composing again, not for recitals, for rooms that felt like Terrence. Quiet ones, honest ones. He started teaching younger kids at school. Not lessons, listening. One girl, stuttering from anxiety, hummed a single note in tune. Ayan didn't smile, just nodded. That's enough, he said. And it was. Because he finally understood. The greatest conductors don't just wave batons. They conduct courage, breath by breath. Years later, on the night of his first national performance as conductor, Ayan stood behind the curtain, baton in hand. The stage pulsed with expectation. The musicians waited. The crowd shimmered in silence. He closed his eyes, inhaled, and in that breath he heard everything. The dust of the old gym, the hum of vinyl, the crack of his first note, the pause circled in red. The orchestra watched as he stepped up. No words, just a glance. Then the baton lifted, and he began, not with a grand overture, but with a single note, the one that always came before the rest, the one he played for no audience, no acclaim, the one he once whispered into an empty gym. And somewhere, maybe far, maybe near, someone hummed it back. After the concert, Ayan didn't attend the after-party. He walked the empty city streets alone, baton still in his coat pocket, music still in his bones. He wandered past lit cafes, closed bookstores, laughing strangers. But his feet had a map of their own. He ended up at the old school gym, now converted into a youth center. New lights, new floors, but the door still creaked. He stepped inside. Everything smelled different. But in the corner, he saw it, a faded plaque above a bench, in memory of Coach T for the ones he stayed for. Ayan sat beneath it, flute in hand, notebook beside him. No audience. Just silence. He didn't cry. Just wrote. A new piece. Not titled yet. Because some music doesn't need names. Just someone willing to listen. Even if they're gone. The next morning, he returned with something wrapped in cloth. Terrence's old cello, restored. The receptionist watched curiously as Ayan placed it in the corner. Someone might need this, he said. He didn't wait for thanks. Just left. Weeks later, he received a letter from the youth center. A kid had picked up the cello. A quiet one. Trouble at home. But he stayed late. Practiced. Said nothing. Just played. The note ended with a single line. He asks about the man who left it. Ayan smiled. Didn't write back. Some stories don't need replies. Just resonance. He started composing again. Not for fame, but to leave behind instruments only the bruised could hear. He mailed scores to no one. Left flutes in shelters, cellos in churches. His music no longer aimed to be remembered, only found. In an interview years later, a reporter asked, "Why didn't you take the conservatory offer? The international tour? Ayan paused. Because the audience I cared most about left the room before the clapping started. The reporter blinked. You mean? Ayan just shook his head. It's not important. But later that night, he opened an old tape recorder and played a cassette. Grainy, static-filled audio of two boys laughing, a missed note, a hummed correction. Him. Terence. The gym. He closed his eyes and sat in that moment. Not to relive it, to remember who he became because of it. Some people write music. Some people become it. Terence didn't teach him to perform. He taught him how to survive, how to stay. And that sound, imperfect and beautiful, would never fade. Ayan returned to the concert hall one last time, not to perform, but to listen. A child prodigy was scheduled to debut, barely 10, sharp and dazzling. Ayan sat in the back, unnoticed. The piece began, fast, clean, brilliant. But at bar 17, the child hesitated. A mistake. A pause. The audience tensed. But then, he played on. Not faster. Not louder. Just realer. And Ayan smiled. He could hear the crack. The hurt. The breath. When the piece ended, applause erupted. But Ayan didn't clap. He closed his eyes. Somewhere, somehow, someone was teaching honesty again. He rose, left quietly, and walked into the night. Not triumphant. Not sad. Just whole. The baton stayed in his coat. The music stayed in his chest. Not for stages now. For streets, for strangers, for stillness. The last time Ayan played publicly, it was in a subway station. Rain falling above. People rushing past. He didn't wear a suit. Didn't announce himself. Just lifted the flute and played. A few stopped. Some dropped coins. One girl stood, transfixed. When he finished, she asked, "Do you teach?" Ayan looked at her. She was young. Nervous, dull. Reminded him of someone. "I don't," he said. "But I can stay." She smiled. Sat beside him. But said nothing. Just listened. That night, he wrote a new piece. Unnamed. Unfinished. Full of space. Not every story ends with applause. Some end with another voice, waiting in the dark, learning how to hum. He walked into the concert hall and no one recognized him. Kenny, embarrassed. Not the man who once cried over forgotten notes. Not the boy who shook when called to speak. He had become a silhouette of grace beneath velvet lights. The first breath he took on stage was not for air. It was for memory. For the coach who saw music in silence. For the cracked whispers of encouragement on muddy fields, far from any symphony. He didn't bow. Not yet. He looked out to the full audience, scanning not for applause, but for one empty seat that always mattered most. The orchestra waited. Hundreds of eyes on him. But his gaze belonged to someone who wasn't there. The one who taught him how to hold confidence like a baton. He lifted his arms slowly, as if remembering how to do it from years ago, in a field where rhythm came from running feet and shouted names. Each breath from the musicians felt like a wave crashing toward him. He didn't flinch. He welcomed it like a storm he was born to conduct. He whispered, not audibly, but within himself, "For you, coach." And then he moved. Graceful, measured, unshaken. He didn't just conduct the music. He set it free. The violins cried like children rediscovering wonder. The brass roared with pride. The percussion marched like history, remembering itself. And the man once shy became a vessel, not of ego, but of echoes. Backstage, he had rehearsed the gestures 1,000 times. But no motion could prepare him for this moment. The moment he realized he didn't need to prove anything anymore. Not to the critics. Not to the crowd. Not even to himself. He had already done the unthinkable. He had turned fear into fluency, silence into sonatas. The first standing ovation came like a wave of thunder, yet he barely registered it. His heartbeat was louder. He saw tears in the eyes of strangers, moved not by his name, but by his surrender, by the honesty of every crescendo. He closed his eyes briefly. Behind the lids, he was 10 again, running in baggy clothes through rain-soaked grass, being yelled at by a man with a whistle and a heart made of sunlight. He never played the sport well, but he had learned how to breathe, how to show up, how to be seen. Now on this stage he felt seen again, but not for being brilliant, for being whole. A soft voice echoed in his memory. "You're not just shy, kid. You're listening to things others can't hear yet." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hurts because it knows it's late. He took the final bow not for himself, but for a ghost in a tracksuit who taught a boy how to lead. Outside, the world didn't stop. Cars still honked. Phones still rang. But inside him, a stillness had bloomed. He exited the hall into the night air. Alone. No entourage. No champagne. Just the moon and a memory. He walked without knowing where. Just forward. As if the ground beneath him had rehearsed this path. A park came into view, the same kind with rusted benches and flickering lamps. Oh, and there, beneath a crooked tree, he sat down. The bench was wet. He didn't care. He let the cold seep into his bones. It reminded him he was alive. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded photograph. Old, worn, faded. The coach and a much younger him both laughing. He touched the edge with trembling fingers. "You knew," he whispered. "Even when I didn't." He sat there for an hour. Maybe 2. No one stopped him. The world let him grieve quietly. He didn't cry. Not fully. Just a single tear that refused to fall. It hovered in his eye like a note not yet played. And then he stood. Not taller. Not stronger. But real. The next morning the photo was framed. Not on a wall but in his dressing room mirror's corner, where every day began with doubt. It wasn't a shrine. It was a reminder of where courage came from. He no longer needed applause to feel worthy. He had heard something better, the echo of belief from someone long gone. Every concert after wasn't a performance. It was a conversation between who he was and who believed he could be. He started writing letters. Not to anyone alive. Just to him. The coach. Simple notes. "You were right. I remembered the field today. I missed the way you believed in silence." He never mailed them, but each word was a way to breathe again. People asked what changed. Why his music now made people cry who had never cried before. He said nothing. Some symphonies don't begin with sound. They begin with loss. He became known not as the best, but the most human. The one who could conduct emotion like weather. And yet, he remained quiet off stage. Still shy, but never again silent. He never gave interviews. Never explained his journey. But every time he lifted that baton, people understood. His final performance came without announcement. Just a regular night. No banners. No farewell. But those who were there swear the air felt different. Heavy. Sacred. He walked onto the stage like a man carrying a final message. The orchestra noticed it too. Something in his breath. The way he looked toward the empty seat with an old, tired smile. He began the first movement. It was not loud. Not fast. It was a lullaby for the forgotten. Some say the entire piece sounded like a conversation with a ghost. When the final note ended, he held still for several seconds. Then he whispered, "That was the one." He left the stage and never returned. No curtain call. No encore. Just silence. A year later a child asked, "Where did he go?" And the answer came, soft as wind through leaves. He's still conducting, just not here.